Doc, I suspect we should start with this week. So much has happened in the month of August. No question really to ask here. Just need to open up the microphone and let you express yourself.
Well, on the one hand, as you can imagine, though, it was a beautiful thing. I was there in D.C. to see the magnificent expression of the faces, the sparkling eyes of everyday people of all colors, hungry, thirsty for justice, hungry and thirsty for truth. Then you turn to so many of the major organizers and major speakers at the march, not too much truth, not too much talk about justice, mainly talking about voting rights, and every once in a while you see a vague reference to jobs. Now, they had some wonderful speakers earlier in the day, but most of the country didn't get a chance to hear them. But for the most part, Brother Martin himself, I think, would have been turning over in his grave. He wants people to talk about Wall Street criminality. He wants people to talk about war crimes with drones dropping bombs on innocent people. He wants people to talk about the new Jim Crow and the privatization of education and the various ways in which the well-to-do, the oligarchs and plutocrats are getting away with murder. You didn't hear that whatsoever. You not only got to tame Martin Luther King Jr., but there was a real sense in which who he really was at the end of his life hardly surfaced at all. And we saw, of course, the coronation of the bona fide house Negro of the Obama plantation, our dear brother Al Sharpton, supported by the Michael Dysons and others who have really prostituted themselves intellectually in a very, very ugly and vicious way.
How much of the truth being muted you think had to do with the very presence of the first African-American president, that nobody, even if they wanted to, could really break free because of his presence? You don't want to, put another way, embarrass the president.
Well, I think the Clinton plantation, if this celebration had taken place when Clinton was president, we would have had very similar things. I mean, Jesse, of course, is more progressive than Sharpton in terms of his willingness to step outside the plantation and then go back on the Clinton plantation, but he was willing to step out in the way which Sharpton is not. But if it had taken place under Clinton, it would have been very similar. It would have been very truncated. It wouldn't have been serious talk about mandatory sentences in the crime bill and the welfare bill and the deregulation of undermining of Glass-Steagall and what was going on in Serbia and the dropping bombs and so forth. So that it's not as if it's unique to the Obama plantation or unique to the Obama administration at all. It's that our leadership now is just so sold out. It's so bought out. It is so deferential. It is so subservient that I think Martin Luther King Jr. would just shed tears and turn over in his grave. That's all.
See, I think you're right about that. I don't think it's just about the Obama administration, although that certainly does put another complex layer on top of it.
That's true. That's true.
But
That's true.
I think these pomp and circumstance events, these celebrations, these historic moments are worthy of, and I applaud the fact that we draw attention to these moments, if not for ourselves, certainly for the nation. But these events are designed, I think they are conducive for great storytelling, but not deep truth-telling. The events themselves just don't allow people to get that kind of truth out. And then you put the first African-American president in the midst of it. Nobody wants to say anything that's going to disrupt the program. Nobody wants to be that courageous bull in the china shop that's going to tell the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, how inconvenient that it is. And so you're right about the fact that those three evils that Martin talked about, racism, poverty, and militarism, what you got at the anniversary celebration the other day was you got a subtle reference to racism. We couldn't even talk about racism overtly. You get subtle references to racism. You get some acknowledgement of poverty, and you get absolutely no conversation about militarism. That conversation just didn't come up at all. The only person to even mention Syria of the main speakers, Bernice King, at least mentioned the word. She at least got Syria out of her mouth. But again, nobody else was going to offer any conversation, any critique of militarism. And the president certainly wasn't. But as I watched him give that speech, and I'm sure you had the same thought I had, and I'm curious to get your take on it. But Doc, as I watched him, I kept thinking, because I already knew that he was going back to the White House after he spoke for a conversation with the PBS NewsHour. Judy Woodruff and Gwen Ifill, the new host of the NewsHour on PBS, had an interview scheduled with him back at the White House after his speech. And I knew, of course, if they were going to do their job, they were going to ask him about Syria. And so I'm watching him, and I'm thinking that here he is now, standing where Martin stood 50 years, standing where our greatest peacemaker, where this prophet of nonviolence stood 50 years, giving this speech, while in the back of his head, he knows he has to go back to the White House and get back to planning for military engagement in Syria. And I ask myself, how is it that we honor Martin today with our words in Washington, as we prepare to dishonor him tomorrow with our deeds in Syria.
That's right.
How do you connect those two things,
That's
Doc?
right. No, you don't connect them at all. You see, they clash. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. Barack Obama's got drones. Martin Luther King Jr. had prophetic mission. Barack Obama's got deadly missiles that he's ready to use. He already used them in Libya. And, of course, on the continent of Africa, they've got now 12 centers for drones under his administration. For what? For the militarizing. You're absolutely right. The militarism that Martin Luther King Jr. was willing to live and die for. The problem is that the integrity has now been reduced to wholesale cupidity, love of money and publicity, love of high visibility. Serious talk about honesty, the level of dishonesty. Even our dear brother Ben Jealous talking about, I heard him say Barack Obama would fight for the second New Deal if it were not for Republicans. We know Republicans are off the wall. Too many of them are reactionary, and some of them even xenophobic. And we know that they hate Barack Obama for the wrong reasons. He's not a Muslim. He's not a socialist at all. But for him to say Barack Obama would have inaugurated a second New Deal if it was not for Republicans, that's dishonest. That's intellectual dishonesty. We saw too much intellectual dishonesty. That goes hand in hand with the mendacity, hand in hand with the lack of integrity, and that's why the people left in many ways disappointed in terms of something that was real, but they did get something that was exciting and entertaining.
Let me ask you directly, what did you make specifically of the president's speech?
It was pretty words that hide ugly deeds.